Beautiful soul. A family member has finally broken years of silence. And the truth they revealed was never supposed to reach your soulmate. The distance between you was never fate. It was carefully created by someone who stood inside the family all along. Today, the hidden reason behind every delay, every misunderstanding, and every painful goodbye is finally coming into the light. By the time this message ends, you will understand why your soulmate could never truly forget you. Listen carefully. For a long time, you believed that life simply pulled the two of you in different directions. Every missed opportunity, every unexpected silence, every broken plan seemed like another cruel twist of destiny. Even your soulmate slowly began to wonder whether the universe itself was asking them to move on. But what neither of you knew was that someone much closer had quietly stepped between your hearts long before either of you realized what was happening. This person never openly spoke against you. Instead, they chose a far more dangerous path. They smiled in front of everyone, offered comforting advice, acted like they wanted peace inside the family, yet behind those smiles they quietly redirected conversations, hid important truths, and allowed misunderstandings to grow until they became impossible to ignore. Every time your name was mentioned, they carefully changed the story just enough to create doubt without leaving any evidence behind. Little by little, they convinced everyone that keeping distance was the safest decision, while secretly believing they were protecting something they could not bear to lose. Don't skip. What makes this story even more heartbreaking is that your soulmate never stopped feeling your presence. No matter how hard they tried to move forward, something always pulled them back toward the memories you shared. They would suddenly remember your voice during the quietest moments of the night. Your name would appear in unexpected conversations. Old photographs would somehow find their way back into their hands. Even dreams refused to let your connection disappear. They could never explain why their heart kept returning to someone they were told had already moved on. Deep inside, they sensed that an important piece of the story had been hidden from them, but every question they asked was answered with another carefully prepared explanation. Eventually they became exhausted from searching for answers that nobody seemed willing to give. Meanwhile, the family member responsible grew more confident, believing time would erase every feeling that still remained between the two of you. They never imagined that the truth they buried so deeply would one day rise to the surface through the very people who helped hide it. Don't skip. Everything changed during what should have been an ordinary family gathering. No one expected anything unusual to happen. Conversations filled the room, laughter echoed through the house, and everyone believed it would end like every other gathering before it. Then, without warning, one older relative quietly stood up and asked for everyone's attention. Their hands were shaking. Their voice carried the weight of years spent hiding something they could no longer keep inside. They admitted they had watched the truth remain buried for far too long and that every day of silence had become harder to live with. The room instantly became silent as every pair of eyes turned toward them. Your soulmate looked completely confused, unable to understand why such emotion suddenly filled the room. Then came the words nobody was prepared to hear. The relative confessed that your separation had never happened naturally. Someone inside the family had deliberately influenced almost every important decision that kept the two of you apart. Important conversations had been hidden. Honest feelings had been dismissed. Messages had quietly disappeared before reaching the right person. Chances to reconnect had been stopped long before either of you even knew they existed. As each sentence unfolded, forgotten memories suddenly began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle that had remained incomplete for years. Faces filled with disbelief. Hearts raced with shock. Even those who once defended that family members slowly realized they had been protecting someone they never truly understood. But then the relative paused, looked directly at your soulmate, and revealed that the real reason behind every lie was far more personal than anyone in that room had ever imagined. The moment those words were spoken, it felt as though time itself had stopped. No one dared to interrupt. Even the people who had always believed they knew the whole story suddenly realized they had only been looking at the surface. Your soulmate stood completely still, searching every face in the room, hoping someone would deny what had just been said. But no one did. The silence itself became the confirmation. Then the family member who had finally chosen to speak took a slow breath and admitted that the hidden reason was never about protecting the family, preserving traditions, or avoiding conflict. It came from fear. The fear that once you and your soulmate truly chose each other, everything inside the family would change forever. Someone believed your bond was so powerful that it would shift loyalties, expose old lies, and reveal secrets that had been buried for years. Instead of allowing that to happen, they decided to separate you before your connection became impossible to break. Don't skip. As the confession continued, even more unbelievable details began to emerge. Your soulmate learned that several important conversations had never reached them. There were moments when you had tried to explain your heart, but those words were quietly blocked before they could ever be heard. There were times when your soulmate had searched for a way back to you, only to be told that you no longer cared. Invitations disappeared. Messages were left unanswered because someone made sure they stayed hidden. Simple misunderstandings were turned into permanent distance by a person who knew exactly which words would create doubt. Every painful memory that once seemed random suddenly revealed a pattern. It had never been coincidence. Someone had been guiding the story from the shadows while pretending to care about everyone's happiness. Don't skip. Your soulmate could no longer hold back their emotions. Every memory returned with new meaning. They remembered the nights they almost reached out to you but stopped because of advice they trusted. They remembered the moments they questioned your loyalty even though their heart kept insisting you would never intentionally walk away. Regret began filling every corner of their heart because they realized how many years had been stolen by a lie they never thought to question. Around the room, relatives lowered their eyes in shame, finally understanding that silence had allowed the truth to remain hidden for far too long. But the confession was still not over. The relative slowly looked toward one particular family member. and with trembling hands pointed directly at the person who had started everything from the very beginning. The entire room turned in disbelief. While that person realized there was no longer any place left to hide, for several long seconds, the person who had just been exposed refused to say a single word. They looked around the room, hoping someone would defend them, hoping someone would dismiss the accusation as a misunderstanding. Instead, they were met with silence. The expressions on every face had changed. People who had trusted them for years were now remembering countless strange moments that had never made sense before. The excuses, the sudden changes of plans, the warnings about you, the constant encouragement to move on. Everything suddenly carried a completely different meaning. Your soulmate could barely breathe as one painful realization after another rushed through their mind. They understood that the love they had spent years trying to forget had never truly been lost. It had simply been buried beneath carefully created lies. Don't skip. Unable to carry the weight any longer, the family member who had been exposed finally lowered their head. Their voice trembled as they admitted they had convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. At first, they believed separating the two of you would prevent future problems inside the family. But as time passed, pride replaced good intentions. Every lie demanded another lie. Every hidden message required another excuse. Instead of correcting their mistake, they continued building a wall between two people who had never stopped caring about each other. They confessed that there were moments when your soulmate almost discovered the truth, but each time they found another way to redirect the situation. Looking back now, they admitted that every year of silence had become heavier than the one before, and the guilt had finally become impossible to carry. Don't skip. Your soulmate felt both heartbreak and anger at the same time. Not because love had disappeared, but because so much precious time had been taken away without either of you being given the chance to choose your own future. Tears filled their eyes as they quietly whispered your name, realizing that throughout every season of separation, their heart had never truly belonged to anyone else. The room remained completely silent as everyone witnessed the emotional weight of that moment. Then one elderly relative slowly stepped forward and said something that changed the atmosphere once again. They revealed that years ago, before all the misunderstandings began, your soulmate had made a private promise about you, one that almost no one in the family knew existed. If that promise could be found, it would prove beyond any doubt that their feelings for you had never changed. Every eye immediately turned toward the old wooden cabinet where forgotten family documents had been stored for years. Because someone suddenly remembered exactly where that promise might still be hidden. Everyone hurried toward the old wooden cabinet, but no one spoke a single word. The atmosphere had completely changed. Just minutes earlier, the room had been filled with confusion, but now every heartbeat carried the same question. Could the truth really have been waiting here all these years? One by one, the drawers were opened. Old family photographs, faded envelopes, forgotten journals, and documents that had not been touched in years were carefully placed on the table. Your soulmate watched in complete silence, unable to look away. They did not know what would be found, but deep inside, they felt that this moment would answer questions they had carried for far too long. Don't skip. After several minutes of searching, an elderly relative suddenly froze. Hidden beneath a stack of old papers was a small sealed envelope with your soulmate's handwriting across the front. The room instantly fell silent again. With trembling hands, they opened it and slowly unfolded the paper inside. Every eye remained fixed on the letter as the first lines were read aloud. It was not a legal document. It was not a family agreement. It was something far more personal. Long before the misunderstandings began, your soulmate had written a private promise that no matter how difficult life became, they never wanted to build a future with someone if their hearts still belonged to you. They had written that real love should never be replaced by pressure, fear, or the expectations of other people. Those words had remained hidden for years, never reaching the people who needed to hear them most. Don't skip. Tears quietly filled the room. Even the family member who had admitted their deception could no longer hide their regret. They realized that while they had been trying to control the future, they had unknowingly preserved the very proof that exposed every lie they had told. Your soulmate carefully held the letter against their heart, unable to stop the tears that now flowed freely. Every sentence confirmed what they had felt all along, that despite the silence, despite the distance, despite every attempt to separate the two of you, their love had never truly disappeared. But just as everyone believed the entire truth had finally come to light, the oldest member of the family quietly whispered something that made every face turn toward them. They revealed that this letter was only one part of the story. Because there was another hidden item, locked away in a different place, containing the one confession that would finally explain why your name had frightened someone in the family from the very beginning. The room remained completely silent after those words were spoken. No one rushed to ask questions anymore. Every person present understood that they had already uncovered enough truth to change the family forever, yet they also sensed that one final answer still remained hidden. The oldest member of the family slowly walked toward a small wooden chest that had been kept untouched for years. They explained that it had belonged to someone who believed the truth should always survive, even if people tried to bury it. With careful hands, they unlocked the chest and removed a worn envelope that had faded with time. There was no anger in that moment, only anticipation. As the envelope was opened, a handwritten confession was revealed. It explained that from the very beginning, the person responsible had recognized something unusual about the connection between you and your soulmate. They saw a love that could not be controlled, influenced, or replaced, and instead of accepting it, they became afraid of it. They feared losing the influence they held over the family. They feared that once your soulmate followed their own heart, years of manipulation would collapse overnight. That fear slowly transformed into jealousy, and jealousy eventually became the hidden force behind every decision that kept the two of you apart. Reading those words aloud filled the room with overwhelming emotion because everyone finally understood that your separation had never been caused by destiny. It had been caused by one person's unwillingness to let go of control. Don't skip. Your soulmate closed their eyes for a long moment, allowing every memory to return with its true meaning. The unanswered messages. The broken plans. The sudden distance. The confusing conversations. Every painful chapter finally made sense. Instead of feeling hatred, they experienced something even stronger, a deep sadness for the years that had been lost. Time could never be returned, but truth had finally replaced confusion. Slowly, they stood up, held the letter close to their heart, and quietly said that they refused to allow another lie to decide the future. For the first time in years, they were no longer listening to fear, pressure, or anyone else's expectations. They were listening to the voice that had remained inside them from the very beginning, the voice that had never stopped whispering your name. Around the room, family members lowered their heads, many with tears in their eyes, realizing how easily silence had allowed one person's choices to affect so many lives. Several relatives apologized for believing stories they had never questioned, while others admitted they should have searched for the truth much sooner. Don't skip. The family member who had caused the separation finally stepped forward with tears in their own eyes. They admitted that every attempt to keep you apart had ultimately failed because real love had never disappeared. It had survived every obstacle, every misunderstanding, and every passing year. They asked for forgiveness, not because they deserved it, but because they could no longer carry the weight of their own actions. Whether forgiveness would come or not was a decision only time could answer, but one thing had already changed forever. The truth was no longer hidden. The lies no longer held any power. Your soulmate now understood that your absence had never been a sign of rejection. It had been the result of a secret that had finally been exposed. As the evening came to an end, the atmosphere inside the home felt completely different. The heavy silence that had once been built on deception was replaced by honesty. Family members who had stood on opposite sides of the story were finally united by the truth. Your soulmate looked toward the doorway, not with regret, but with hope. They knew that the next chapter of their life could only begin after facing the past with courage. The road ahead would not erase every painful memory, but it would no longer be guided by hidden manipulation or fear. For the first time in years, they believed that what was meant to be would finally have the chance to happen naturally. And somewhere beyond everything that had been lost, beyond every tear and every unanswered question, one quiet truth remained stronger than ever before. Genuine love can be delayed by lies, tested by distance, and challenged by fear, but when the truth finally finds its voice, no secret is powerful enough to keep two hearts apart forever.